The Danish crown shattered. King Frederik X's secret decision that could end the monarchy forever. Welcome to B News. What happens when a king who swore to protect his nation's most sacred traditions suddenly breaks every rule in the royal playbook? On this cold November day in 2025, the Danish monarchy, one of the oldest continuous royal houses in the world, stands at a precipice it has never faced before. King Frederik X, who ascended to the throne less than 2 years ago amid celebration and hope, has just made a decision so shocking, so unprecedented, that it has sent shockwaves not just through Copenhagen's Amalienborg Palace, but through every royal court across Europe. Palace insiders are calling it the announcement that changed everything. Political analysts are predicting constitutional chaos. And the Danish people, they're divided like never before, with protests erupting in the streets and hashtags trending worldwide. This isn't just another royal scandal about infidelity or financial impropriety. This is something far more dangerous, something that strikes at the very heart of what it means to be royal in the 21st century. The question that everyone is asking, from the cafes of Copenhagen to the halls of Parliament, is simple yet terrifying. Has King Frederik X just signed the death warrant for the Danish monarchy? What could possibly drive a king to make such a controversial move? And more importantly, what does this mean for Queen Mary, their 4 children, and the future of one of Europe's most beloved royal families? Before we dive deeper into this royal crisis that has captivated the world, I need you to do something crucial. If you want to stay updated on the most explosive royal news, the stories that mainstream media won't fully tell you, then smash that subscribe button right now. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update, and if you're as shocked as we are by what King Frederik has done, leave a like on this video. Now, let's uncover the truth behind the palace walls. The story begins not in November 2025, but actually traces its roots back to January 14, 2024, the day that changed everything for the Danish royal family. That was the day Queen Margrethe II, Denmark's beloved monarch who had ruled for an astonishing 52 years, made her own shocking announcement during her New Year's address. At 83 years old, she declared she would be abdicating the throne, citing health concerns following back surgery the previous year. The news stunned a nation that had grown up knowing only one monarch. Queen Margrethe had been the very embodiment of Danish royalty, elegant, intellectual, artistic, and deeply committed to her duties. Her decision to step down was unprecedented in modern Danish history, as Danish monarchs traditionally serve until death. But Margrethe, ever the forward-thinking ruler, believed that the monarchy needed fresh energy and a new perspective for the challenges of the modern age. She chose to pass the crown to her eldest son, then Crown Prince Frederik, believing he was ready to lead Denmark into a new era. Little did she know that her son would take new era to heights or depths she never imagined possible. Crown Prince Frederik Andre Henrik Christian ascended to the throne on January 14, 2024, becoming King Frederik X in a ceremony that blended centuries of tradition with contemporary Danish values. The 55-year-old king was widely seen as the perfect modern monarch. Educated at Aarhus University and Harvard, a former military officer who had served in the Danish Frogman Corps, Denmark's elite special forces, Frederik had spent his entire life preparing for this moment. His marriage to Australian-born Mary Donaldson in 2004 had been hailed as a fairy tale. Romance, a crown prince meeting a commoner in a Sydney pub during the 2000 Olympics, falling in love, and bringing her back to become Denmark's future queen. Together, they represented what many saw as the ideal royal couple, relatable yet regal, modern yet respectful of tradition, and genuinely committed to serving the Danish people. They had 4 children: Prince Christian, born 2005, Princess Isabella, born 2007, and twins Prince Vincent and Princess Josephine, born 2011, who seemed to embody the perfect balance between normal childhood and royal responsibility. When Frederik took the throne, approval ratings for the monarchy soared to over 85%. The Danish people believed they were entering a golden age of the monarchy. But beneath the surface of this picture-perfect royal family, tensions were already beginning to simmer, pressures were mounting, and King Frederik was quietly contemplating a decision that would shake the very foundations of the institution he had inherited. For the first 18 months of his reign, King Frederik X appeared to be everything Denmark had hoped for. He modernized royal protocols, making the monarchy more accessible to ordinary Danes. He championed environmental causes with a passion that went beyond mere symbolic gestures, actually pushing for substantial policy changes. He spoke openly about mental health, breaking centuries of royal stoicism to discuss his own struggles with the immense pressure of his position. He and Queen Mary undertook state visits that strengthened Denmark's international relationships, and they supported Danish businesses and cultural initiatives with genuine enthusiasm. The king seemed to understand that modern monarchies must earn their relevance every single day, that they cannot simply rely on tradition and pageantry to justify their existence in democratic societies. But those closest to the king began to notice changes in his demeanor as 2024 progressed into 2025. He became more withdrawn at private functions, more questioning of long-established protocols, and more outspoken about his frustrations with the limitations placed upon him by constitutional requirements. Palace staff reported that the king would often work late into the night, not on official correspondence, but on personal research, reading constitutional law, studying the histories of other European monarchies, examining cases where royal families had faced existential crises. He met privately with constitutional scholars, political philosophers, and even Republican activists, meetings that were deliberately kept off the official calendar. Something was brewing inside King Frederik X, an intellectual and emotional storm that would soon burst forth in the most dramatic possible way. The first real cracks in the facade became publicly visible in late September 2025, though at the time, few understood their true significance. During a state dinner honoring visiting diplomats, King Frederik made an impromptu addition to his prepared remarks that caught everyone off guard. He spoke about the inherent contradictions of hereditary power in truly democratic societies, and questioned whether institutions built on the accident of birth can genuinely claim to represent the will of the people in the 21st century. The comments were subtle enough that mainstream media largely glossed over them, but constitutional experts and royal watchers immediately recognized them as extraordinary. Never before had a sitting Danish monarch publicly questioned the very legitimacy of the monarchical system. Danish tabloids began speculating about a rift between King Frederik and the political establishment, with some suggesting that Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen's government had somehow offended the king. Others wondered if Queen Margrethe had expressed disapproval of some of her son's modernizing efforts, creating family tension. But the truth was far more radical than anyone suspected. King Frederik wasn't having a dispute with politicians or his mother, he was having a philosophical crisis about the entire concept of monarchy itself. And unlike most people who have philosophical crises, King Frederik was in a position to actually do something dramatic about his conclusions. The question was, just how far would he be willing to go? Then came October 23, 2025, a date that will forever be marked in Danish history books. On that autumn evening, as Danes settled in to watch their regular evening news broadcasts, programming was suddenly interrupted by an announcement that the king would be making an unscheduled address to the nation. This alone was alarming. Danish monarchs don't make surprise announcements. Everything is carefully planned, vetted, and scheduled weeks in advance. The fact that this was happening spontaneously sent immediate ripples of concern through the country. When King Frederik appeared on screen, seated not in the formal setting of his office but in a simple chair against a plain background, viewers knew something unprecedented was about to happen. The king looked tired but determined, his expression serious but not cold. And then he spoke words that no one could have predicted, words that would be replayed thousands of times across global media in the hours and days to come. My dear fellow Danes, I address you tonight not with a message prepared by advisors or approved by government officials, but with words that come directly from my heart and my conscience. After much reflection and soul-searching, I have reached a conclusion that I believe is necessary for the future of our nation. I am announcing today that I intend to initiate a national referendum on the future of the monarchy in Denmark. I am asking you, the Danish people, to decide whether this institution should continue to exist, or whether Denmark should transition to a fully republican form of government. The silence that followed in homes across Denmark was deafening. Had the king just asked his own people to potentially abolish his throne? The immediate aftermath of King Frederik's announcement was nothing short of chaotic. Within minutes, social media platforms exploded with reactions ranging from shock and confusion to anger and support. The hashtag Danish monarchy trended worldwide within an hour, with the story dominating international news cycles. Political leaders were caught completely off guard. Prime Minister Frederiksen later admitted that the king had not consulted with her or any government officials before making his announcement, a breach of protocol that itself was constitutionally questionable. An emergency session of the Danish parliament, Folketinget, was convened the next morning, with lawmakers from across the political spectrum demanding explanations and struggling to understand the legal implications of what the king had proposed. Constitutional scholars appeared on television trying to explain that there was no existing mechanism for such a referendum, that the Danish constitution doesn't provide for the people to vote on abolishing the monarchy, and that implementing the king's proposal would require constitutional amendments that themselves would require complex parliamentary procedures. Opposition parties accused King Frederik of either having a mental breakdown or staging a political stunt, with some demanding his immediate abdication. Meanwhile, the royal family itself was reportedly in turmoil. Queen Margrethe, who had carefully managed the monarchy's image and stability for over 5 decades, was said to be devastated and bewildered by her son's decision. Queen Mary's position was particularly complicated, as someone who had married into the royal family and transformed her entire life to become queen consort, her husband's actions potentially invalidated every sacrifice she had made. And what about Crown Prince Christian, the 19-year-old heir to the throne, who had been raised his entire life to one day become king? In one television address, his father had potentially made his entire future irrelevant. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this crisis was King Frederik's reasoning, which he elaborated on in a lengthy written statement released through the palace's official channels on October 24, 2025. In this document, the king laid out an intellectual and moral argument against hereditary monarchy that was both sophisticated and deeply personal. He acknowledged the historical importance of the Danish royal family, recognizing that the monarchy had served important functions throughout Denmark's development as a nation. He expressed gratitude for the dedication of his mother and his ancestors who had taken their roles seriously and served with dignity. But he argued that the fundamental principle of monarchy, that political power and national representation should be passed down through bloodlines, was incompatible with genuine democracy and equality. How can we tell Danish children that they can grow up to be anything they want to be, that their birth circumstances shouldn't determine their opportunities, while maintaining an institution that embodies the exact opposite principle? He wrote, "How can we claim to believe in meritocracy while having a head of state who earned that position solely through genetic inheritance?" The king acknowledged that modern constitutional monarchies like Denmark's have limited political power, serving primarily ceremonial and symbolic functions, but he argued that symbolism matters profoundly in shaping a nation's values and self-understanding. He pointed to successful republics around the world, including Nordic neighbors like Finland and Iceland, that functioned excellently without monarchies. He suggested that the money spent on maintaining the royal family could be redirected to social programs, education, and healthcare. Most dramatically, he argued that keeping the monarchy essentially meant asking his children and grandchildren to sacrifice their freedom and privacy for an institution that couldn't justify its existence on rational grounds. "I do not wish to condemn future generations of my family to lives they did not choose, in service to an institution that may no longer serve the nation's best interests," he concluded. It was a remarkable document, thoughtful, well-reasoned, and utterly devastating to the institution he represented. Public reaction to King Frederik's proposal has been deeply divided, revealing fault lines in Danish society that many didn't realize existed. Polling conducted in the weeks following the announcement has shown a complex picture. Initial surveys suggested that approximately 42% of Danes support maintaining the monarchy in its current form, 31% favor holding the referendum and potentially transitioning to a republic, and 27% remain undecided. These numbers have fluctuated as the debate has continued throughout late October and into November 2025. The pro-monarchy camp argues that the royal family is an integral part of Danish national identity, providing continuity and stability in an increasingly chaotic world. They point to the tourism revenue generated by royal attractions, the diplomatic soft power provided by state visits, and the charitable work undertaken by royal family members. Many older Danes, particularly those who grew up under Queen Margrethe's reign, feel a deep emotional attachment to the institution and see King Frederik's proposal as a betrayal of tradition and his own mother's legacy. On the other side, the pro-republic movement has been energized by the king's stance. Young Danes, particularly those under 35, are significantly more likely to support the transition to a republic, viewing the monarchy as an outdated institution that perpetuates inequality and wastes public resources. Progressive political parties have seized on the moment to advocate for what they call completing Denmark's democratic journey. Some argue that King Frederik's willingness to question his own position demonstrates exactly the kind of moral courage and forward thinking that Denmark needs, even if it means ending the monarchy. The debate has become intensely personal for many Danes, touching on fundamental questions about what Denmark is and what it wants to be in the modern world. The constitutional and legal dimensions of this crisis have proven to be extraordinarily complex, revealing just how unprecedented King Frederik's proposal truly is. Denmark's constitution, originally adopted in 1849 and revised several times since, does establish Denmark as a constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary system. The constitution does contain provisions for amendments, but these require specific procedures. A proposal must be passed by parliament, followed by a general election, and then the newly elected parliament must pass the same proposal again, followed by a national referendum where at least 40% of eligible voters must vote in favor. The process is deliberately designed to be difficult, ensuring that constitutional changes reflect deep and sustained public support rather than temporary political whims. However, nothing in the Constitution specifically addresses the scenario of a monarch voluntarily initiating a referendum on the monarchy's existence. Constitutional law professor Dr. Henrik Larsen from the University of Copenhagen explained to media outlets that, "We are in truly uncharted waters here. The king, constitutionally speaking, doesn't have the power to unilaterally call for a referendum. That power rests with parliament. But equally, there's no constitutional provision that prevents a monarch from expressing personal opinions or making political proposals, though convention has always held that monarchs remain strictly neutral on political matters." The situation is further complicated by the fact that any formal move to abolish the monarchy would require the king's own assent to the legislation, creating a paradoxical situation where the king would need to sign off on his own removal. Legal experts have suggested various mechanisms for navigating this complexity, including the possibility of the king abdicating first or parliament passing emergency constitutional provisions. As of November 10, 2025, the government has established a special constitutional commission tasked with examining the legal pathways forward, but the commission won't report its findings until early 2026, leaving Denmark in a state of institutional limbo. The international implications of Denmark's royal crisis extend far beyond its borders, sending concerning signals to other European monarchies and fascinating republicans worldwide. The British royal family, still recovering from its own series of scandals and controversies, has watched the Danish situation with particular anxiety. If a popular, well-functioning monarchy like Denmark's can face an existential referendum, what does that mean for more troubled royal families? King Charles III's representatives declined to comment on the Danish situation, but British royal experts have acknowledged that King Frederik's actions have opened a Pandora's box that could inspire republican movements across Europe. The Spanish, Swedish, Norwegian, Belgian, and Dutch monarchies, all of which face their own challenges with public perception and relevance, have similarly maintained official silence while privately expressing concern. Meanwhile, Republican activists in all these countries have pointed to Denmark as evidence that even monarchs themselves are beginning to recognize the anachronistic nature of hereditary rule. French President Emmanuel Macron, whose own country abolished its monarchy over 2 centuries ago, offered subtle support for the democratic process King Frederik initiated, noting that, "the will of the people must always be paramount in determining how they are governed." The European Union has carefully avoided taking any stance on what it characterizes as an internal Danish matter, though some EU officials have privately expressed hope that the situation, R11,